we have to stop ourselves from constantly being in this pattern of, okay, keep on going and doing the same things over and over again. We have to sometimes check in with ourselves and say, okay, first and foremost, what is one thing that I'm doing that isn't serving me? Right?
Yeah.
How can I stop myself from being in that pattern?
Hey everyone, it's Melanie Johnson. I hope you're having a super great day today. So, we have a lot of great things to dive into. We're going to talk about change, connection, challenges, powering, sharing your story. We got all kinds of good stuff we're diving into today. We have Tony Martinetti who is joining us. He is a leadership advisor. Now, I always tell people, oh, you're like, oh, you don't have to lead. I'm a home, I'm a mom, I don't have to lead. Well, you know what? I didn't realize that, yeah, you're leading your family, you're leading your kids. When I was at conferences, I'd be like, "Oh, no, I don't need to attend the leadership thing because 'cause I'm only leading myself." And then I'm like, "Hello, you've gotta lead your family." So anyways, Tony, welcome. Thanks for coming today.
Well, thank you for having me. And I love that you just said that. That was, leadership is takes on so many different capacities and, we're leaders of ourselves first and foremost.
For sure. So tell us, how did you get started? Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are now.
Sure thing. Before I get into the work I'm doing now, I spent about 25 years working in high tech and biotech. So
Mhm.
it was an interesting journey, very interesting industries. And particularly the work I was doing was in finance and strategy roles. So I spent time with numbers, being analytical. And what deep down was interesting about me is that I am an artist at heart. I'm someone who loves painting and drawing and, being creative. And so you can
Usually those 2
imagine
things
how
don't
it's
go together,
yeah,
Tony. Usually you have one side of the brain or the other, not both. So that you're a unicorn.
totally, totally.
So continue, tell us more how you got to where you were from there.
Yeah. And I was on this journey to continue to go up and up in the corporate world and, doing well on the surface. But I think deep
Mhm.
down, there was always a missing piece, feeling like, what
Yeah,
else is there? Or what is it that I'm missing? And people would tell me all the time, there's more to you than what you're letting yourself experience or be. But I would say, okay, but this is what I get paid to do. And it all came down to me burning myself out and realizing, God, I got to change something. And so I had a moment when I was sitting in a boardroom of a biotech company and I decided that I need to leave this room. I wasn't happy with the way leaders were showing up in that room.
yeah,
And I took this moment of courage and decided that I needed to leave the room to change the room. And that's what I did. I got up, I walked out and decided I'm going to leave to change the way leaders are showing up, to make it more an inspiring situation for people, and to
yeah.
also think, how can we have a better work environment for people?
Yeah. And today we've had so many different, even the last few years, just so many different natural disasters and things. You and I were talking briefly about that before we got on. And then you've got AI that's changing the world so rapidly. How
Mm,
do we embrace change? How do we have I mean, these are challenges. It's not just change, but it's challenges. And
yeah.
how do we turn those challenges into opportunities?
Yeah, and I'll start with this concept I love to share, which is this idea that like we often succumb to this idea that chaos is something we have to manage. We have to
Hmm.
accept that chaos is there. Change is often coming in this time when things are just feel uncertain. They feel like hard to really get our hands around.
Yeah.
But the first thing we have to do is just slow ourselves down and understand, where am I? How am I feeling about what's happening right now? And how can I create the inner calmness that allows me to get clarity
Hmm.
around what I need to do in this moment? So navigating change, it starts with an inner move of understanding who we are, what are we trying to do, and how do we ensure that we've got the groundedness to lead through change.
Yeah, and it is sometimes hard to quiet your mind that way. I
Yeah.
I get that, like taking that time to take a breather or step out in nature or just giving yourself the permission to be quiet. Do you find that's difficult for some of the people that you work with?
Yeah, and myself as well. I mean, it's this is a journey that we never finish. We have to always be on the journey of figuring out how do we slow things down, because the world is always trying to speed things up, and we need to find moments where we can just say, okay, what's important right now? What's essential to me in this moment? And how can I slow things down so that I can get the clarity I need to lead forward in this moment of change or whatever is
Yeah.
expected of me?
And you talk about like how the past can uncover the now, right?
Mhm.
When we're having these quiet moments, walk us through why we should be discovering our past.
Yes, I'm glad you bring that up because, this is one of those things where we get stuck in patterns. We just keep on moving forward. But the thing that is important when we have those moments of pause is to think, where have I come from? What are the things that have made me into who I
Mhm.
am? And if we can look back to the past and say, what are the moments that have ignited me, my gifts into the world? I call them flashpoints,
Yeah.
and understand how those flashpoints have revealed my gifts and how can I, instead of just glossing over them,
Mhm.
really understand them so that I can see how they are driving me now. And I'll use an example, so I came from the background of, finance, analytics, that kind of thing. If I just completely say, okay, I'm going to do a complete 180 and change the way that I'm looking at things, then that's fine, but it's not going to serve me well to just run away from that. What I
Yeah.
need to do is use some of the tools and the things that I actually learned in that time and apply them into the path forward.
Yeah. It's funny. So you use the tools that I learned. My business partner and I are so guilty of we've got all this knowledge. We've gone to all these seminars and business seminars, personal seminars. And then when we go to do like a task where it's like all of it goes out of our head. And we're like, okay, we're starting from scratch. Well, I have no idea how to do this. We're like, duh. We learned if we go back, we have all of everything that we need. And I think that's part of what you're saying too, is by going back in the past and really analyzing it, we really do have a lot of the tools that we need already in our personal toolbox.
Exactly, and also the qualities that we've unearthed, like the courage in moments where we've been challenged, we need to sometimes harness those moments of courage in our current moment that we're dealing with
Mhm,
right now. And so I think that's important to say, well, if we're saying we can't do that thing that we're facing right
mhm.
now, we look back to the things that we've done in the past and say, oh yeah, like we can do this. We just need to harness those moments of like, well, I've done that. I've done this and I've done this. And if I think back to what it took for me to do those things, here's how I can do it.
Yeah, and another great point that you make is about connection, and I
Mhm.
find in today's world, I mean, I've been, working from my home before people worked from their home for the last 10 years, and
Good.
more and more people are doing that, and I find it's harder to find your community and find connection in people. Why is
Mhm.
that so important, and what should we be doing to try and step out of that and step out of our comfort zone to create that community and connection?
Yeah, the way I look at connection, it's so important. First of all, because of this fact that we are kind of separated by distance and what have you, it's really important to share more of who we are with others, and that takes courage. And so it starts with this idea of like when you're in community with others or trying to get into community with others, make sure you're not holding back
Mhm.
aspects of who you are. We talked about
Yeah,
stories a moment ago. Maybe it's, bringing in what are the hobbies and things that light you up and
yeah.
sharing that with other people will help them to see the different aspects of who you are, not just the work self. I'll use
Mhm.
an example of, I worked with a data scientist, brilliant person who she was a violinist as well, and oftentimes I would challenge her. I'm like, "Well, you should share some of that with the people around you so they
Yeah,
understand who you are more completely." And she did. Not only did it help them to see who she is, but it also gave her the confidence
yeah.
to show up in the room more powerfully.
Yeah, and I think that's so true. A lot of times people see all the shiny faces on social media. They see like who you're trying to be. You're showing your best self, but you're not really showing that, yeah, I've had crash and burn moments. I've had things I've had to get over. I've had struggles. And then people relate to you going, "Oh, I've done that too. I thought you had this perfect life." And
Mm,
no, it's not perfect. And when you can share that and be vulnerable, and part of that is even when you write your book, right? Is sharing the stories that you're vulnerable and being able to take that off, take that cape off to do that. We have so many authors that are hugely successful in their life, and then they're afraid to put their book out because it's like, oh my gosh, what if no one likes it? They're afraid to tell their story. What if someone won't appreciate me or criticize me? And how do we get overcome of those fears of being criticized for putting ourselves out there?
yeah, I think you start small, especially for people who are afraid to do that, oftentimes you start with doing it in small circles. I did
Mhm.
this TED Talk called "Don't Check Yourself at the Door." And I use this methodology called the core methodology, which is, C stands for get curious, O is open, R is release, and E is expand. And I think the E part is really important. Once you started to get a little bit more comfortable with your own ability to share your stories with people who know you a little bit, then what happens is you can start to expand to bigger circles. So
Mhm.
start small. Don't go grand and big right out of the gate and say, I'm going to share with people the story of my,
Yeah.
dealing with cancer or, being on the verge of suicide and not to be negative, but not to be so dark. But those moments are worth sharing. But you
Yeah.
have you have to kind of graduate to that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's tough to data dump everything out and then you're not sure how it's gonna be respected or and kind of practicing doing that. And, as a leader, it is good to share personal stories too, so they know that you're real. How
Yeah.
would you say, to invest in yourself? You tell people the importance of investing in yourself and your
Mm.
team. I think so many times we forget to pour back into ourselves and stay current. Why is that important?
Yeah, I just wrote something about this, investing in our heart, in our mind. It's not just about intellectually investing in, reading books and what have you, but it's also making sure that we're investing in the time that we need
Mm.
for, building connections, deepening our relationships with people. And the importance of that, if I were to, make sure I'm answering your question most fully, is that, these are the things that we need to be able to serve others. To be in
Mhm.
service, which a lot of leaders want to be, at least the ones who are good leaders, they want to be of service to others. And if we can't be of service to others if we're not taking care of ourselves.
Mhm.
And so I think that is where the investment comes in. It's investing in our own being so that we can be of service to others.
Yeah, think about it. I know, like, if you're having a crummy day, you're walking around with that energy
Yeah.
versus if you're on top of the world, you have this other energy and that's infectious to people, but both are infectious to people. So either you're like grumpy, right? If you're a grumpy leader, other people are going to be grumpy too. So it's kind of like you say, when you're in a good space, whether it's for your family or
Mhm.
for your company, or whether you're a leader of a company or you're working for a company, I think it's really important when you're in a good space, you pour it into yourself spiritually, emotionally, your
Yeah.
heart, like you say, you're pouring into your heart, I think can make such a big difference with your team and your family.
Totally. And I love that you keep on, bringing this idea that it's just not just about the workplace. It's about how we're showing up for others around us. If you think about the environment that we're creating around us, we're all walking,
Yeah.
environments, if you will, and we affect everything around us. And so if we want to, it's not about showing up and being like, externally showing a picture of what we want to display, but it's also being mindful of how am I feeling and how is what I'm feeling, really resonating to others?
Yeah, and,
Good or bad.
some of it too is like one of your tools, I think, is having that vision
Mm,
and keeping the vision, right? So
mm,
when you have this vision for your life, your team, your family, and then tapping in that, like me just thinking about that right now is making me feel joyful. Like it's taking me to a different place of having that vision. What are some tips to do that? Sometimes I feel like we're even afraid to share our vision. Like they say,
mm.
share your vision with your team on every team meeting. But it's like, well, if I say we want to get to $5 million revenue, does that really inspire them? Because it's, you know what I mean? Like, how do you
Right.
have the vision that is your personal vision, but also can translate to the other people in your family or your team that it inspires them?
Yeah, I love that you bring this up because we talk a lot about stories and our journeys and
Mhm.
how we narrate who we are. But I think it comes down to this idea of making meaning through stories. And so you don't want to just lead with the end result of, okay, here's the number we're after, here's the
Yeah.
result we're after, but instead tell the story of why it's important.
Mhm.
Simon Sinek really tapped into this whole why idea, which is important, but to really get into how do you make the why meaningful,
Mhm.
it's through stories, sharing, little elements of why we're doing what we're doing, even for yourself.
Yeah.
Reinforcing. Oftentimes, I'll work with people around their values and say, "Why is this value important to you? Tell me a
Yeah.
story as to where that value came from."
Mm.
And what happens is when people start to tell a story about a particular value and why it's important, they start to get really excited and sometimes even really passionate about why that value means something to them.
Yeah, that is so true. That's a great way to explain that, I think, to be able to utilize that and make it much more powerful versus just the end result. You talk about 3 key lessons. Walk us through your 3 key lessons.
Yes, the three key lessons. One of the things that's on my website is this idea of how I navigated my journey and broke patterns. Is that this idea of getting out of our comfort zones? And I think that in the key lessons, we have to stop ourselves from constantly being in this pattern of, okay, keep on going and doing the same things over and over again. We have to sometimes check in with ourselves and say, okay, first and foremost, what is one thing that I'm doing that isn't serving me? Right?
Yeah.
How can I stop myself from being in that pattern? And when I realize that I'm doing something that is not serving me, how can I take
Mhm.
one step that will get me out of that pattern?
Yeah.
Um,
That's powerful. What is that one step? I think that makes a big, big difference. If you had to say a leader who is someone who is just starting a business, right?
Mhm.
There's so many people that are starting out, especially the new year, like, all right, I'm going to do this year. I'm going to try this year. Give me some tips of what do you think the most important things are that they should be thinking about when they're doing that?
Well, I use this little tool with my clients, and it's called expand your vision, narrow your focus. Now, the reason why I love this because it could be used in many different capacities. So, if you're starting a business, before you get into this mode of like, okay, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Think bigger. Think about like the most biggest, grandest way of embodying what you want to do, your vision.
Yeah.
So expand, think bigger, get yourself to dream, if you will. But first, once you've done that, then you need to think about what are the things that truly light me up or make my
Mm.
business come to life in this way. Once you do identify those, maybe there's 2 to 3 things that are
Yeah.
most important, then you've got to narrow your focus and say, "Now, I've got to put myself and my business on rails." And that
Mm.
means, really making sure that the focus is on those 2 or 3 things that are so important that I'm not gonna allow myself to get distracted because distractions are everywhere. So
Yeah.
that where it's so key. If we just stay expansive, the challenge is that we become so overwhelmed.
Hmm.
Um, so we need to get focus. And that might also mean hiring others to do things that are not meant for us.
Yeah, knowing what your superpower is and being able to say it's okay to spend money on somebody else.
Yes.
And I like you say expanding your focus. What we learned is so we've been in business for about 10 years now. And we started saying, well, we're going to start saying we're a global publishing company.
Mm.
So, and once we said we're a global publishing company, we started getting people from all over the globe that started coming to us. So I think it's when you say, you put your foot in the sand and say, or draw that line in the sand of who you want to be with that dream, and then focus in on what are the tasks you have to do to get there and hyper focus and turn some of the other noise off if you can. And we are, my business partner and I, we are both little ADHD. So there's always the squirrel and the
Sure.
shiny object of let's run over
Yeah.
here, let's run over there, and then coming back to that focus. It's not easy to do. And sometimes you get caught up in your own. I interview entrepreneurs all the time, and sometimes they get caught up in their own, how do I want to say, like sales story. They're
Mhm.
like, you know what I mean? Like they're doing so much talking, but they're not doing so much doing. And you can't be everything to everybody. How do you know when it's the right time as a leader to say, I'm going to reach out and hire other people and expand that circle?
Well, the right time is the begin is always, you always be thinking, how am I ensuring that I'm checking in with myself,
Mhm,
even, every step of the way, always have a moment where you take a step back and say,
mhm.
okay, how am I doing? How am I feeling like the results are showing up? And how do I feel about how things are showing up? Because
Yeah,
if I'm feeling constantly burnt out, that means that I'm doing too much of something that's really not meant for me. So I would say, what I mean always is constantly, be checking in.
yeah,
But I also would say when you start to feel like you're hitting wall after wall after wall, and you're feeling this sense of like not getting the results you're looking for, that is a sure sign that you need to start thinking, who can I reach out to for help?
yeah.
And it's not a sign of defeat. What it's a sign of, it's a sign of growth. It's a sign of like,
Yeah.
you're on this growth edge. We're saying, I've reached this point where for me to get to my next point of potential, I need other people on the journey.
That makes complete sense. Well, this was great advice today. I want everyone to reach out and check out Tony's books on Amazon. There's Campfire Lessons for Leaders and Climb the Right Mountain. So check out both of those books. But Tony, tell us where people can find you and connect with you.
Well, the best place to find me is my website, ipurposepartners.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active. Post a lot of thoughts and insights on the website there. So
Terrific. Well, thanks for coming. And everybody have a great week. And remember, if you're looking to publish your book, we make all our authors #1 bestsellers. So reach out to us at eliteonlinepublishing.com. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Hey, are you looking to increase your revenue, build credibility, and elevate your brand? This podcast is brought to you by Elite Online Publishing, an innovative publishing and full spectrum marketing company. They will publish and market your book to make it a #1 bestseller. Becoming an author is the best way to market your business. So contact them at eliteonlinepublishing.com today. All of their authors become #1 bestsellers.